basing your happiness, your satisfaction, your contentment on something that's not even here yet. Why can't you just be content and satisfied before you get the job? The reality is, if you're discontent making $20,000 a year, you're going to be discontent making $200,000.
Yeah.
If you're discontent living in an apartment, you're going to be discontent living in a house. If you're discontent with no husband, guess what? You're going to be discontent with a husband. You're seeking after things to make you content. But let me tell you something. Contentment doesn't come from external sources.
All right.
Contentment is something that you find in your spirit.
Yeah.
Contentment is something that you find when you realize I might not have everything, but me and God is a majority. So as long as I have a relationship with Jesus, I'm satisfied, I'm content, because all the power and position in the world does not change my demeanor.
Yeah.
Right.
This is something that we have to learn. This is something that we have to understand. And sometimes God will keep you from your promotion until you get happy.
Yeah.
Come on.
Sometimes God will decline your next level until you can find some satisfaction where you are. You've been in the ghetto for 20 years. Maybe it's for a reason. Because before God moves you to the next level, He wants you to be content with the 3-bedroom house before you get the 6.
Right now.
Sometimes God will say, stop right there.
Yes.
I am hindering your progression until you can get satisfied. I am hindering your progression until you can find peace. Because ultimately, if I give you what you're praying for without happiness, you are just going to be an unhappy rich person. You're just going to be unhappily married. And ultimately, what you need to be able to find before the power and the position is a reason to smile even without it.
Yeah, yeah.
He tells Saul, you've got this power, you've got this position, but you're still disobeying. And then verse 19, Samuel kind of highlights how Saul disobeyed. The NIV says that Saul pounced on the plunder. Let me explain what Samuel means by this. Remember, God originally told King Saul to vanquish everything, to wipe everything out, kill everything. Saul decided, no, I'm going to do something better. I'm only going to kill the weak and unhealthy livestock, and I'm going to keep the choice and prize livestock. And Saul gives an explanation as to why he decided to keep the strong and healthy livestock in verse 21. Look at what he says. Verse 21. This is Saul trying to, share the reason for disobeying God. Saul says, the soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. So this is what Saul says. Saul says, well, I know I was supposed to kill everything, but I took the best animals, and I decided that I was going to use the best animals, the healthiest animals, to sacrifice with. So I was going to dedicate these animals that were still healthy and that were in good shape. I was going to dedicate these animals to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I rationalized in my head that it was okay. I know God told me to kill them. I know God told me to destroy them. I know God told me to not let them live where they were. But I thought it wouldn't be a big deal if I just kept them and then ultimately gave them to God. Listen. We get ourselves in a whole lot of trouble when we decide to keep what God has told us to kill. We put ourselves in a world of hurt when we decide to hold on to the things that God is calling us to release. And then what's worse is we find a way to spiritualize holding on to it. You see, Saul said, I kept it. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I kept it because I was going to give it to God. You know, we do that a lot in relationships. See, some people date people. They have no reason and no business dating. They know that person is bad. They know that person is no good. That person is sorry. And God is telling them to kill them. Not literally. But God is saying, no, this is something you need to cut off. But then you just start to spiritualize and you say stuff like, well, maybe I'm in his life because I'm supposed to show that person Christ. Maybe God brought me to that person's life. It's been 10 years. He He ain't came to church with you. He ain't read the Bible with you. He ain't prayed with you. He ain't got down on his knee with you. And you still trying to spiritualize keeping something God told you to kill. Tell somebody and tell them everything in your life that God says get rid of it. Tell them, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. And stop spiritualizing stuff. Stop trying to make things spiritual. Call it what it is. Just stand up and say, I'm being disobedient. God told me to get rid of it, but I'm still choosing to hold on to it, and it's only to my detriment. This is why this is a great contentment principle. Because being content isn't just about what you gain. Being content has as much to do with what you release as what you gain. See, we think contentment is all about getting and acquiring but no. Contentment is also about shedding and losing and dropping and walking away from things. And if you only gain but don't cut, then ultimately your life is going to become overloaded and bloated with things that is holding you down and hindering you. What you need to do is stand up and say, it might hurt, it might feel bad, I know that I might cry a little bit, but if God said kill it, I've got to kill it. If God said I don't need the relationship, I'm going to walk away. If God says to break these habits, I'm going to break them. If God says not to enter this deal, I'm not going to do it, because I'm willing for my contentment's sake to kill everything that's not of him. Saul wouldn't do this. Saul decided to keep what God says kill. And we place ourselves in a zone of discontentment when we find that we have all this baggage and all this luggage and all these extra things that God has told us to shed, but yet we're still taking them on the journey, taking all the junk and the mess on the journey. Saul tried to rationalize keeping what God called him to kill. And then ultimately Saul boils it down to the very lowest denominator. He lets us know in verse 27. $30. $24. He lets us know in verse 24 his motivation behind disobeying God. And this really, for me, this is the crux of contentment. He says in verse 24, then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instructions. Look at what he says. Catch this, because this is huge. And somebody's about to get free. Somebody in here is about to get free. He said, I was afraid of the people. Wow. And so I gave in to them. I was afraid of the people. And so I allowed the voice of the people. I allowed the cries of the majority to cause me to disobey you. And now I'm in this despairing state because I chose to put the voice of the people above the voice of God. This right here might not apply to everybody, but I know that this applies to somebody. You want to know the biggest thing that will kill your contentment? People pleasing. The inability to say no. The inability to let people down. The inability to hurt feelings will keep you from being content as long as you live. The inability to be firm. The inability to say, this is as far as I'm going to go, and I'm not going to go any further, regardless of the names they call you, regardless of if they don't talk to you for 3 years, regardless of their disposition towards you. The inability to take a stand against the voice of the people will constantly keep you discontent no matter what you try to do. I know that this doesn't apply to everybody, but this does apply to the person that has a hard time being firm. This does apply to the person that has a hard time applying yourself and standing up and saying what needs to be said, exactly when it needs to be said. Let me tell you why this is important. People have a tendency to walk all over you.
Come on.
If you give them an inch, guess what they're going to take? They're going to take a mile. I don't care if it's your kids. I don't care if it's your in-laws. I don't even care if it's your best friends. If you don't set up barriers, if you don't have boundaries, if you don't have some type of standards for how far you're going to go and what you're going to allow yourself to do, you'll find yourself out of money, you'll find yourself out of energy, you'll find yourself out of advice, you'll find yourself out of a whole bunch of things. And here's the reality. Listen, this is going to sound really selfish, but it's the reality. As much as you help others, you need to help yourself. As much as you pour out, you also need to pour back in. If you're constantly giving, constantly pouring out, constantly extending yourself without being refreshed yourself, without being revived yourself, then ultimately you're going to become bitter, you're going to become mean, you're going to become cantankerous. Even though you might wear a fake little smile, deep down inside you're going to hate every time you see your phone rings. You're going to look at the call ID and you're going to say, oh my gosh, what they want now. You're going to answer it with anger. But you go, hi, how you doing? Yeah, I got it. What you need? Go right over. And it's going to cause your life to deteriorate because you're giving everything else out without putting anything else back in. And people pleasing, listen, I want to harp on this fact right here, because people pleasing more than any other aspect of contentment will keep you frustrated. Yes. Trust me, I know, because I've been the yes man. Yeah. I've been the one that says, you know what, no problem, I'll come, I'll be there, no problem, what you need, you need me to go, you need me to go. And then at the end of the day, I go home where my wife and kids are. And I'm so exhausted dealing with everybody else that I ain't even got enough for my wife and kids. And so my household begins to suffer. And guess what? When your household begins to suffer, then it's really hard to find contentment. See, you're trying to find contentment everywhere else, but if you can't find contentment in your house, then what's the point? And I found out that everything else in my house was suffering, well, because I was trying to play superhero to everybody else's kids and to everybody else's family, and I didn't realize that there has to come a time where I say, I can still love you and still say no. I can still value you and say no. I can still think that you're great and say no. And on this occasion, you can hate me if you want to hate me. You can decide not to talk to me if you want to decide not to, but I just can't come. I just can't do it. And the moment that I got the power to do that, then contentment began to spring in my life. You need to be released from the guilt. You need to be released from what you know they're going to say about you. Because here's the reality. They're going to say it about you whether you do it or not. They're going to say it whether you write the check or not. They're going to say it about you. And guess what? 3 months later, they'll forget the check that you wrote 3 months ago. And they'll ask for another one. If you don't do it then they're going to get upset and mad at you then. So what you need to do is set up a boundary and tell them, Pookie, I love you, you're great, but I'm not going to let you run over me. That's not godly. That's not good for my health. That's not good for my sanity. And because I love you, I'm saying no. Because I love you, I'm keeping you in jail. Because I love you, I'm not going to pay your mortgage. Because I love you. I can spend all day on this. I literally can. Because look at what happened. Saul listened to everybody else saying, do this, do it this way, that he ignored the voice of God. When you people please, the voice of people becomes more important than the voice of God. What they say and how they feel becomes more important than how you feel and how God feels. And contentment can never spring forth from a life that's committed to people pleasing. Right. That's it. That sounds so unloving. That sounds so unloving. Let me tell you something. You're supposed to love your neighbor as you love who? So if you don't pour anything into you, then you're not going to have anything to pour into others. And it's good to give, but don't give until you're broke yourself.